Hey, kia ora! Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Mesa in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling day. And today is Tune Up Tuesday, and one of the topics we get to talk about today is one that's called I'm Wonderful, and you'll find out more about that story in a moment. And then we've got our fun activity, which is all about Broadway musicals. Yes, there is interesting stories behind some of the Broadway musicals, so we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're talking about Tune Up Tuesday. Today, it's going to be about language. And this story from Chicken Soup for Soul, Think Positive, Live Happy. It is called I'm Wonderful. And the quote that goes with it: the habit of being happy enables one to be freed, or largely freed, from the, hang on, the lighting's not so good here, from the domination of onward conditions, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, so I'm wonderful. When I was a young mother, I decided to venture into the workforce. I needed a job that would allow me to be home with my children when they needed me most. Tupperware home parties were the answer for many of us during the 1960s and 1970s. It was fortunate that I was fortunate to have an incredible trainer who not only developed in me a positive mindset, but also left me with a winning outlook on life. You gotta have mentors. They are the most amazing people. If you get a really good one, I can still hear her first words in our training class. Hi, class. How are you? The answers varied in the room from fine, okay, scared, etc. But her next words would have stayed with me forever. That is a polite question. No one but your mother really cares about the honest answer. From then on, when asked how we felt, we all said wonderful. I made wonderful part of my everyday language. One morning, when I went out to get the newspaper, my neighbor said to me, Hi, how are you? I replied, Wonderful, how are you? She said, Are you always wonderful? Don't you ever have a bad day? God, this is sounding familiar because mine's super fantastic and sparkling, and I often get the same question. Sure, I do, but if I told you my problems, it wouldn't make either of us feel any better. Plus, saying wonderful keeps me thinking, sorry, I got to turn the page, and feeling that way. Feeling wonderful is a choice every day. It's certainly easier to give in to the pressures of life, to let negativity invade our minds and souls. However, saying, I'm wonderful, at least once a day can become a habit that will change your life and the lives of those around you. Several years into my Tupperware career, my trainer, now mentor, asked that I started teaching her classes. I was excited every day to teach the all life-changing lessons I had learned. Of course, every class began with I'm wonderful. My new attendees were aspiring Tupperware managers. They had heard and hopefully said I'm wonderful many times by now. After my class, one of my students approached me and said, You always say you're wonderful, but you can't be wonderful all the time. I looked at her and responded, My grandmother is dying. I have 3 teenage daughters who are a handful. I'm going through a divorce. I may have to sell my home, and I have a yeast infection. Does that make you feel better now? She said immediately, no. And I said, well, it doesn't make me feel better either. So I'm wonderful. Love that. Everyone has their own problems and daily issues. We can choose to share them with the world and all feel together, or we can simply say wonderful and change the dynamics. And that's by Christine Bryan. I get that question all the time when I tell people I'm super fantastic and sparkling. They ask me, do I ever have it? I go, yeah. I said, but if I turn around, but I always say that I'm super fantastic and sparkling because it keeps me in that mindset. I can let stuff bring me down, and there are times my sparkle is not as bright as it could be, but I'm always staying in that positive mindset because I have that super fantastic, sparkling, positive attitude. No matter what happens, today is always super fantastic and sparkling. I mean, that morning when Brad passed, on the board next to his bed, the day before, I had changed it to I changed the Welcome Home Brad to read, no matter what happens, today is always, and always is in capital letters, super fantastic and sparkling. And that morning when I was sitting with his body around 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm looking up there, all I could see was today is always super fantastic and sparkling. And I sat there with my heart breaking going, it truly is. He is no longer in pain. He is free. He is completely mobile. His body's just been so broken by cancer. He's still living. He's just moved to a different plane of existence. So it was a very tough day to get through, but I kept my super fantastic sparkling attitude about me. Um, I let people. I didn't. I don't think I responded. I'm not sure if I responded to anybody that day with that answer. Can't remember. I know I got a lot of hugs that day. And the best hug I got was from my grandson, who was 2.5 years old at the time. Um, him and his mum and dad walked in the door, and his mum put him down on the floor, and he just made a beeline straight for me, and I just reached down and grabbed him, his biggest hug ever. It was, to this day, still the most amazing hug I ever had. It was from a 2.5-year-old who knew that grandma needed a lot of support that day and a lot of love, and he just gave it completely, fully, and unconditionally. It was the most magical moment of that. It was another magical moment. That day was full of magic. The magic of knowing that Brad was no longer in pain, that he was okay. The magic of watching that first sunrise without him being in this, with him after the first experiencing the magic of the first sunrise after he transitioned, the most perfect sunrise I have ever seen. I have never seen another one like it since. And the magic of a hug from somebody who gave love unconditionally. Those are some of my magic moments that day, plus all the friends and family that came and visited and the love and support that they gave. It turned that day was super fantastic and sparkling, but in a completely different realm, because it was just so full of the magic of love and gratitude that day. But this one, when she turns around and says, "I'm wonderful," um, it's all the what she's saying with "I'm wonderful" is what I do with super fantastic and sparkling. It is also the same when people ask me, you can't always be super fantastic and sparkling. And I have a very dear friend and mentor, and he will call me up and he goes, "So how are you doing?" And I go, "Super fantastic and sparkling. Thank you. How are you?" He goes, "Great." He says, "Now, how are you really doing?" And then we get into the nitty gritty of our coaching call or mentoring call, whichever one it is. And then the last question he always asks me is, "How are we doing?" And I go, "Super fantastic and sparkling." So I can go from this positivity thing to telling him all the issues and troubles that I'm having at the time to being back up on that positivity plateau again, because he started me off there, he finished me off there, and we dealt with the crap in between. And that makes a great, great mentor. So that is the "I'm wonderful" story. Hope you enjoyed that, because I know I did. I loved that story. It was good. It was good. Got to put a check mark here. And now onto the fun activity for today is all about Broadway musicals. I've got a link in the description to Broadway Direct. Broadway Direct has this great article about 20 Broadway musicals that have made that were landmarks in some way. And they may not be the greatest musicals out there, but there was something about them that made them a landmark. And you go read the story about each one. Like, for example, the very first one they have listed is called The Black Crook. It came out in 1866, and it had 474 performances before it toured the country. They said it wasn't the greatest musical, but what made it so significant is it was the very first musical on Broadway. And it was a matter of actors coming together with dancers, and they created this musical. And you can read the little story about it there on the website. Of the I Sing, that came out in 1931, was an American political satire musical. But what this one stood out about is it won a Pulitzer Prize for drama. So, you never know what a musical is going to do or where it's going to lead. And one of my favorite all-time musicals is Phantom of the Opera. The music in it is just incredible. And the first time I saw Phantom was in Sydney, Australia. And the only reason I wanted to go over to Sydney to see it was because my favorite stage performer by the name of Rob Guest was the Phantom. And I had seen him, it had been like 20 years, I think it was, since I'd seen him on stage. And I'd seen him on stage, and the first musical I saw him in was a musical called Half a Sixpence. And I actually have an autographed photo, which I kept because my uncle, who played in the Invercargill brass band many years ago, was also playing in the orchestra for that musical, and he went backstage afterwards, and he knew, and he got Rob Guest to autograph a couple of photographs, and I got sent one of those, and it's one of my little treasures that I have. And then I saw Rob Guest again later, actually maybe I saw him maybe it was Joseph. I saw him first. He was Joseph in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I've always loved that musical ever since I saw his performance in that. Then I saw him in Half a Sixpence, and then I saw him on different TV shows throughout the years after that. And then he moved to Australia because the theatre opportunities over there were so much greater for him. And he was the main character in Les Mis, and I missed seeing him in Les Mis. But then he went on to become the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera, and was the longest running Phantom. Became the longest running Phantom. And Andrew Lloyd Webber actually wanted him to move to England to become Phantom at West End, and he said no, he was not going to uproot his family and move at the time. But I did get to go over to Sydney, Australia, and see him in Phantom, and he was fantastic. I mean, it had been 20 years since I'd seen him on stage. Absolutely incredible, very, very talented guy. And then when I was here in the States a few years ago, he was playing the wizard in the is it the Wiz? It was one of those ones about the Wizard of Oz, about Oz, and he was playing the Wiz, and he actually passed away, not during a performance, but during the run of the musical at the time, and they actually I think he was only like 56 and died from a massive stroke, so that was heart-wrenching to hear that news, and it was. It's been a few years and I still can't listen to his whole album. I've got a couple of his albums. I have his very first one, which was actually a record called Dedication. I used to love that album. That record. I played both sides. I could sing every word to every song on that album. I had dances made for every single song on that album that I had made up. I think I wore that album out. I wore that record out. I eventually taped it onto a cassette tape. And somewhere in my belongings, I still have that cassette tape, but it is so scratched and so worn. You can still hear it, but it's very scratchy. And I would love it if his estate would bring out his very first album, because there were some great songs on that. But yeah, so he went on, and so he's done a couple of albums since then, which are all show tunes, which I absolutely love. But, Phantom of the Opera has been running on Broadway since the 26th of January, 1988, and it is the longest running musical on Broadway. So check out the link there to see the other. So I only gave you 3 out of 17, and I can tell you Oklahoma is on there. It was the first collaboration between Rodgers and Hammerstein. It was their first, and became the template for musicals after that. So that was an interesting story reading that. But there's 16 other stories that you've got to go read about on Broadway. So today is all about listening to Broadway musicals and their tunes. What is your favorite Broadway musical? I would love to know that. And like Cats is probably there. There are so many great musicals out there that I absolutely love. Some of them have been turned into films. Some of them are still on stage. And there's differences between stage versions and movie versions, because some of the songs are different. Some of the scripts are different. I know that between the Broadway musical of Sound of Music and the film Sound of Music are basically the same story, but also they have some of the same songs, but they also have some different songs and some different scripting in there and that sort of thing as well. Anyway, that's it from me for now. Go have a super fantastic sparkling tune-up Tuesday. I am off. I have got an exciting project to work on. I'm going to go get started. So we will catch you guys later today. Hey, konara!